welcome to another episode of Living Room Wisdom, where your story is your glory. I am Patrina Wisdom, abundance activator, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and founder of Pure Abundance Retreats. And I am so excited for my guest today. This is Carol, and I don't want to slaughter your last name, so say that for us.
Umanzor, Carol Umanzor.
Umanzor. Yeah. I love that. And where are you from? What's your background? I hear this beautiful accent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I was born and raised in the Bay Area in San Francisco. But my family's from El Salvador. So my last name comes from El Salvador.
Fantastic. Well, it's so good to have you here. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy to share that I get to pop her video podcast cherry. Like, so inappropriate. That's me. But anyway, to get started, so she is, her brand, her work in the world is born to be seen. And I love this because I know so many women struggle with visibility and really owning themselves and owning their voice. But she also has a master's, and I'm probably going to mess this up, a master's in molecular biology. Is that correct?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So I am extremely excited and intrigued by that. But before we jump into all of those details, I just really want you to share with our audience who you are. Not necessarily what you do, but who you are, Miss Carol.
Oh, wow. That's a good question. So I think what encompasses who I am is just someone who, wants to be free and be seen and just really kind of live life in a way that is connected to other people. So really like living life, choosing connection over protection, which is part of like my life story.
Say that again. Choosing connection over protection. That's powerful.
Yeah. So, I think that that's definitely something that has been a theme in my life, and in all the things that I've done and all the things that I'm doing now, it's really been anchored in that piece of staying authentic to myself and being in alignment with my spirit.
Okay, and so where did this journey originate? Was this kind of your greatest challenge in your life? And would you mind sharing that journey?
Yeah. So I think like where I am now and kind of taking into account like my journey with my education, all that. I think it really started in following all the rules. So like I said, my parents immigrated here from El Salvador in the 80s. There's a war. And so they fled war and they came to San Francisco, and just like any immigrant parents, they were doing everything and anything to survive and take care of my sister and I. So I kind of grew up with this idea of, I need to help my family, and I need to be able to be successful, and I need to be able to like represent my family and my culture, especially at that time in San Francisco. There wasn't a lot of Salvadorian immigrants yet. So a lot of people would come across us and like they wouldn't even know. Like people would ask me often, like, what are you? What's El Salvador? What's all this? And so I had like this feeling of I really need to, make it. I need to make it in the U.S. for my parents, for, my family. So that kind of turned into me following all the rules that are kind of set up by U.S. society. Like, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get an education, I'm going to follow a career that's like respected and give back to my community. And that turned into me becoming a teacher. So I was a science teacher for 7 years. And even that was like a little tumultuous journey because I went in San Francisco, I went to schools that are considered Title I. So these are underserved, under-resourced schools. And then I transferred to I started college at a private university where nobody that I went to school with or had my experience was really there. So that was like a really rough transition for me. And just trying to figure out how to be a science student with this background. And that's really what propelled me to want to be a teacher. And, and I ended up getting the master's in cell molecular bio because I really wanted to increase my content knowledge. And at the same time, while I was there, my research, which I think also is defining of me, I always kind of merge things that don't necessarily make sense to other people. So when I was I did this at San Francisco State, I wanted to increase my content knowledge in bio, so that's why I did specifically a bio program to take classes, graduate level classes. But I wanted to learn more about how to support students like me, students of color, students who maybe had that same experience where they weren't fully prepared to enter a university to be a science student. So I ended up doing a research project on the experience of women of color in biology. So that was my experience in cell molecular. And then, I graduated, I got that degree, and then I decided I wanted to be a teacher. So then I went and I got a master's in teaching, and I went and taught for 7 years. And I think I was just like following all the rules, trying to be my best for other people. And then I found myself just like super burnt out and like really exhausted and just kind of looking at my students. And I think it took me being a middle school teacher, because I started as high school, and high school students come to you already like jaded. They're already like, don't talk to me. They are. Yeah. And so you're trying to win them over, you're just like, let me be, in your life, let me teach you something. But sixth graders come in with so much joy, and like they just love you. They love being in your classroom. They just brought in so much joy. And I had them at sixth graders, and then I would loop with them in seventh grade, and I would see how much that would dip, how they were just not even the same people. And it has to do with puberty and all that too, but schooling, I felt, was doing a disservice, in the way that
deconstructing them in a sense.
Yeah. And so here I was like feeling completely burnt out, and I'm literally teaching young people to do the same thing I did. Follow all the rules, go to graduate school so you can live a life and be burnt out, know? And I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this to the kids. I can't do this to myself anymore. I want to do something different. Like, I need to create something else for myself. And I felt at that time what I wanted to create didn't really exist. And I feel like it still doesn't really fully exist. And I'm trying to develop it and build it. And that's where this journey towards the Born to Be Seen came about, because I really wanted to find a way to build something where in the future students can come and also kind of create joy in their life and center joy through emotional wellness and having like a practice of emotional wellness. And so that's kind of how I ended up in that place.
So this is all very fascinating to me. I love the fact that you were in the teaching system and having that intimate interaction with children, and that you identified that what I'm doing, there's a conflict of values here. This isn't who I am. This isn't how I want to contribute or what I want to contribute in the world. You made a very tough decision to pivot into something, really into the unknown at that time, right? And then what you were feeling called to do, you didn't see it in the space. Mm-hmm. And so you went out and created it, which is, classic entrepreneurship right there, right? And it sounds like it's even still evolving, right? You created it, but it's kind of still evolving.
Yeah, it's still evolving.
So when I hear Born to Be Seen, there's a lot of things that come to mind. Like, okay, well, is it like branding, putting yourself forward? Is it like a nonprofit type, programming? Is it a movement? So tell us a little bit more about what Born to Be Seen has evolved into, maybe where it started, where it is now, and also where it's going.
Yeah, so I think that it started from my own kind of healing journey and me moving from sort of blending in, which also comes from having parents who fled war, where that's what they had to do to survive, was like, don't stand out, follow all the rules, like be in line. And so really kind of having the courage, I think it's really connected to having courage to be vulnerable, to be seen, to have my needs, met, communicated, expressed. I think for me particularly, it is focused on emotional wellness, because that was a huge thing where I think with my family also, there's no room really for emotions when you're trying to survive from war and make it in a new country. So me having my emotions be visible, me really recognizing like, this is how I feel, and this is important, and I need to address what I'm feeling so that I can move forward and thrive. Even just with like boundaries, like making those visible, I think all of that has to do with being seen. And so for me, Born to Be Seen, it's really kind of like a project where I want to share with folks, like, what are the different tools, and I want to be able to share that through workshops and things like that, and then grow it into something bigger where you can kind of apply this in different areas and apply it as like a framework or like a system that people can view themselves as really vital and important, and their needs also vital and important.
Yeah, that's a game changer. It's a game changer because I think that across society, especially in the past, women were not put in positions where they felt worthy of being seen, right? You hear the narrative, be seen, not heard, all of this programming. And we are now in this, I guess it's called a upsurgence or whatever, like this uprising of women that are finding their voice and that are, stepping into new roles in new ways with a new take on, everything. Honestly, it's so funny because I watch commercials, and you watch commercials from like 2 decades ago, and it's always the woman taking care of the kids and the man is the breadwinner and all of these things. Now you have commercials where the diaper commercials are the men, right? Juggling it, right? All of these things, because things have shifted. Right. And there's just a new way that women are showing up. And I truly believe it has to do with this divine feminine uprising, right? So even when you talk about emotions and being able to honor your own emotions, that's a very feminine, supposedly a feminine thing. However, when we honor those emotions, when we don't judge them, when we give ourselves permission to really express and embody all of who we are, we're actually even more powerful, right? And so how has that changed the game for you from this very like masculine upbringing to then embracing your divine feminine? How has that changed your life?
Oh, well, it helped me leave teaching. It helped me, start this project for myself. I think it's really, I connected to freedom and strength. Yes. I think that, growing up, I constantly heard like emotions and like, crying and its expression, it makes you weak. But for me, that was just how I expressed myself, whether I'm angry, mad, happy, that's just what's going to happen. and I started to see it as a source of strength, like not having to suppress it. So for me, I feel like it's become a way for me to not just be strong for myself, but model that for my family, for my community, for your folks. There's been so many people, even when I was a teacher, when I started that journey, and I would talk about like the healing work that I was doing, I've had folks like 5 years later, like I haven't been in the classroom for 3 years now, and things I said 5-6 years ago that are messaging me now, they're like, wow, Carol, I'm like, I was in the room when you were saying that. You weren't even talking directly to me, and I'm so happy that you were sharing this because it led me to do my own, healing work, and I just wanted to recognize that. So that's the kind of thing that I want to keep doing, and I want to, because I feel like that authenticity just really brings more joy, and the more I feel that we can center joy, the more that we'll be equipped for the healing and all the really kind of more difficult emotions that are part of life.
I feel like your emotions have become your superpower.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's a really beautiful space to be. I'll say work, but for me, I replace work with play, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a really juicy space to be playing in, because I think a lot of people, period, but especially women, don't have a good relationship with emotion, right? Because we've been taught that it's not a positive thing, that, like you said, it makes us weak. And even myself, my mother was a well of emotions, is still a well of emotions, just so passionate, so like, heart-centered and connected with her emotions. And life and the partners that we choose and things of that nature hardened me up. So as a child, I was very, very emotional as well, and did not see that as a positive thing. And so I developed and curated a strength. So there was a point where I really admired people who could, cry, or people that, so it took a lot of work, and we need people like you in the world that that model and give us permission to show that vulnerability and to honor it and to protect it as well. Because you mentioned boundaries, right? So it's a very like strong vulnerability.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's like a really important aspect of it, because sometimes people get the idea that, I'm just an emotional person and I'm just going to go around. And that's not emotionally safe, you know? And I think part of having a practice of emotional wellness is that you develop a really clear idea of what does emotional safety mean to you. So that if I'm feeling something, I know exactly where to go. I know exactly what I need. And, I know what doesn't work for me. I know where not to go, and that really supports me in processing. Because I think it's about, we house emotions in our bodies. And this goes to like the physiological part, like the science of our bodies. And we need to move it. It's like connected to chemicals and energy and things that are processing. And when we don't, that can lead to, autoimmune disease. Like we have a lot of studies with the adverse childhood experiences, like folks who had a trauma when they were kids, having then this connection to their autoimmune condition when they're in their 50s. And that's of like not being able to process or move that, out of our bodies. And so I think that, it's important to know, how do we do that, and how do we do it in a way that's effective and like feels emotionally safe,
This is so juicy. Oh my God. This is so fascinating to me because, I'm very rooted in the spiritual, and I came into this world with like a natural wisdom, thus Patrina wisdom. Yeah. And there are people that want those hard facts, right? Give me the science, give me the biology. So I love being in conversation with people like you who have that background, and it is. What is. It's truth, right? You can look at it scientifically, biologically, psychologically, it's truth. Right. And I know that just in my own life, how trauma has affected health. When I lost my husband to suicide in 2009, one of the things I realized almost immediately is that I stopped breathing. And breath is life, right? And so actually, it's covered right now, but I have an tattoo here that I got in Bali. And it was a reminder to breathe. Because I believe, you can tell me if this is true, biologically, if you're not breathing and if you're not moving that energy, it gets stagnant and causes the dis-ease. Right?
Yeah, and I think that, having studied bio and being a science teacher, I have this framework of science. A lot of times people see it as like, that's the golden rule, that's the standard. But scientists don't even look at science that way. We see it as evolving. Scientists are literally arguing. My graduate classes, there was the world-renowned person on somites, and a graduate student was challenging them on their research, and they were taking it in. They were like, you're right. We didn't have enough data, and that's what science is. It's constantly challenging. It's constantly evolving and changing. And I think that having that lens helps me look at things like you're saying that we might not have scientific like proof yet for, as we haven't developed the tools to even assess it or even like really be able to gather the data. We don't even have the equipment yet. And that's kind of like with mindfulness and meditation. Years ago, people were saying this is garbage and baloney. Yes. And then we had the tools. We didn't even have neuroscience like up till 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. And now we do. So I think a lot of times there's a lot of value in just having that, like you're saying, like that knowing, and like knowing that it works, because the science might not have caught up yet.
I believe it's all about asking the right questions. And I feel like, and again, I don't know a whole lot about scientists. Honestly, I think you might be the first scientist I've ever met. I just think I'm like so starstruck right now, honestly, because I don't think I've ever sat with a scientist and had a conversation, and you don't present like a scientist, right? I'm loving all of this, but it's all about asking the right questions, because it's the questions that people like you go out and either prove or disprove. Yeah. So what would you say is one of your biggest questions, or maybe an initiative or some research that you're doing right now, or that you've been doing and got answers to, that you find completely fascinating as it pertains to being seen? stepping into that space?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And it's interesting because the work that I do, like in my full-time job with the university, is more connected to like diversity in science. And
That's a well.
and right now we're working on like a study to learn about, where I work, it has a really high representation of women of color in science, more than anywhere in the country,
Wow.
And so the work there is really learning what's happening here that isn't happening in other places. And the other piece is retention is low. So we have this high number, but then people drop. So like what's not happening that's, leading to this. And for me, having gone through this work and just talking to students and kind of learning the environment, I think that it has a lot to do with identity. I think that's one of the reasons that there are so many women of color, because representation is just not in the undergraduate level, but it's in the graduate and the professorship. So like women of color who go and study biology see themselves reflected, And so I think that when you can show up as yourself, and this is the other thing I didn't mention, when I was in graduate school, I also, I did a project on women of color in science. And one of the things that came out from that research was that a lot of them said they felt like they could be themselves. They didn't have to, like you said, I don't present like a science. They didn't have to put on a show, or they didn't have to let go of their culture, who they were, to study science or to be a scientist in the journey that they had taken. And that's what helped them persist.
Well, isn't science typically you're like more in the background as well?
It could be.
Yeah,
and I think
doing the research and
I think it could be, but a lot of times, like for the work that I do, and other folks who maybe want to do research projects, especially in vulnerable communities and communities of color, sometimes being visible is important. Like I know one of my colleagues who she got really high rates of participation on a breast cancer study that affects women of color in particular, because she put herself in the forefront. She had like community meetings. They're like, this is where your data is going. That trust is important, because it hasn't always been respected in science, especially when it comes to vulnerable and like marginalized communities. So I think that being able to show up as yourself, even though if you're told, that is kind of what we're told, you're supposed to be objective. You're not supposed to say anything about yourself, but nobody's objective, there's no, everybody has an intersectional identity that's going to impact the way that you view the world and the way that you do science, the questions that you ask. And I think it's more important for us to put that front and center than it is to try and hide it or pull it back or avoid it, because that's what's really gets you really good information, really good data, really all the answers that you're looking for.
I'm loving all of this. I don't know. I think as I've gotten older, so when I was younger, I never really liked school and studies and all of the things. But as I've gotten older, I'm just so fascinated with science and history and all of this stuff. Well, I think also traveling. When you travel, it brings these things to light, right? It becomes more fun and more real. So for the viewers out there, if there's someone out there that might be struggling to be seen, who maybe has had a similar journey that you've had, whether it was with immigrant parents or not, but really coming up with this upbringing of maybe a more masculine approach where feelings were not honored and emotions weren't honored, what would be some steps that they can take to really step into that more divine feminine way of being and also creating those boundaries?
Yeah, I think the first step is really making space to get to know yourself, So really trying to seek out who you are, what resonates with you, what doesn't. My go-to is astrology. and so I'm all about just kind of looking at your birth chart, looking at what comes up, what feels like it resonates for you and what doesn't, because it doesn't mean that these systems and these quizzes have to tell you who you are, but it is a starting point, like human design as well, Like I'm a manifesting generator, and it that's really helped, because the big thing about manifesting generators, like, give me the options and I'll tell you which one works for me. So that's kind of how I take all these sort of quizzes. Like Enneagram is another one. All these different ways to really get a deeper understanding of yourself, I think are super important. Just really just kind of like overall, like, what are some of the themes that come up that resonate that you might want to work on,
I think that's a great first step also, because, you always have to recognize that there's the different types of people, right? So some are very analytic, and even if it's not human design or Enneagram, there's also like the strengths finders and the DISC assessments and things of that nature. So what I'm hearing is just take a step to become more intimate and more knowledgeable and aware of who you are, and what your natural tendencies and strengths are.
And your areas
play to them,
right, and your areas of growth, because it might give you language that you can feel but you're not sure, so you might have language for those areas of growth that then you can go seek out, and get more resources. And I think like the second step for me is and this might vary, like these steps, you can order them however works for you. But for me, it was emotional safety. So really recognizing what that means and what you already have in place. Because I think physiologically, also in our psychology, we create safeties one way or another. And, safety might be, you can't get close to me. I only let these people in and nobody else, because that's how I stay emotionally safe, and might not even be something I'm conscious of. But for me, in doing the work, because that was my emotional safety, it was like, I'll serve everybody, and don't you can't help me, like that's not okay. I can't tell you what's going on with me, and until I went and like got help, and I feel like I'm the person that tries everything. So I've done therapy, like group counseling, like peer counseling, mindful meditation, like all these different tools that help me also learn about myself. And in that, I was able to discover a new definition, of emotional safety. Like I was able to learn, like, what really supports me is when I feel trusted by someone else. If I'm coming to someone and I could be crying, I could be upset, I could be raging, but that person trusts me to get from where I'm at to where I want to be, and they're just there to hold that space for me, so that can be a range of people, and it's a skill. So just knowing like that's what I need, and knowing who can do that for me, whether it's my family, a therapist, or whoever it is, knowing what I need to be able to move that through me. Sometimes it's nature, sometimes it's co-regulating with nature, or a pet. So I think like that's important, because the next piece that I would say is like going into those areas of growth, so like shadow work, going into inner child stuff, which can be hard and can be triggering. Right. And so having a plan, like if I'm going to have this conversation that's difficult with someone, what am I going to do after when I'm, if I'm spiraled, or if it triggers something for me. So that's where I go to my emotional safety plan. Like I know what to do. I know who to go to. I know they're available. I know, what that means. So I think like really having those things in order, like knowing who you are, what do you need to take care of yourself, and what are the pieces you want to really deep dive into.
Mm-hmm. Having systems in place, support, and being discerning. It sounds like, right? Being discerning of who you decide to offer that part of yourself to as well. And I know like women have shared, like especially who are of service or in careers of service, have a hard time letting people hold them or have that. I've been there.
Yeah,
my family knows. Like if I'm in breakdown, don't touch me. Just don't touch me. Or ask permission. Can I give you a hug? And I'll honestly tell you yes or no.
No, absolutely, and it's real. And I think like in that also having a shift to seeing that as a gift that you offer to someone, like
let me teach you how to love me.
Me letting you be there for me is a gift to you, because it's so much that we support. It is a gift to us. Like, I don't know how many times like I've been able to support someone that I looked up to, and it's like, wow, I feel so lucky I get to support you, So I think like that's also important to consider.
I love it. I love everything about this conversation. I'm excited to see how Born to Be Seen develops, expands, and grows. I'm seeing it as a movement.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah. Okay, because that's what I was feeling, is that it is a movement. And I'm assuming you have a framework that.
Yeah. So that's what I'm moving slowly but surely into sharing, like just kind of what are the steps and how we can move through them, and then deep diving into each one and all the components and nuances, that come up.
I love it. Well, your work is very needed in the world. It's very impactful. Thank you so much for being here, showing up, sharing vulnerably. I'm excited, and hopefully you should have gotten a ton of nuggets here between the science of it and the emotional wellness piece. So with that, I think we will go ahead and wrap this up today. I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Living Room Wisdom, where your story is your glory. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, and we'll see you next week. Bye.